Hi, welcome to the Mathemagic channel. Today we're going to look at how you can crush school math. And whether you're a parent or whether you're a student, this is the right video for you. So today we're going to cover 6 tips as to how you can excel in mathematics at school. Without further ado, let's jump right in. So for our first tip today, we're going to look at learning how to count.
8, the count is still plus 16. 10 is minus 1, counts plus 15.
Well, you might think you already know how to count, and the truth is that most of us learn our times tables and then that's it. And we know our times tables when we're 8 years old, and after that we don't learn anything else. And so for the most part, you'll find that adults and children alike know up to 12 times 12 is 144. And beyond that, the counting ability hasn't been really developed. And so there's a lot more that you can do to grow your counting skills. And so if we look at this quickly together, when you come to the end of a question and you get something like 16 squared, it would be good to know your square numbers and know that 16 squared is just 256. Whether you're doing quadratic equations, Pythagoras theorem, square roots, this is going to be useful. And if you come to the end of a question or in the middle of a question, you have something like a square with an area of 4.5 by 4.5, it would be nice if you knew how to do 45 squared and know that that's 2025. Similarly, if you come to a moment in a question where you see a multiplication like 18 times 22, if you're able to say 396 in less than 3 seconds, that would be super cool. You could do that if you saw that there was a midpoint between 18 and 22, which is 20, and that you could do 20 squared minus 2 squared. Now, all of these techniques come under what we call number theory. If you'd like to know more about number theory, I highly recommend you look at some of the videos on our channel which are covering number theory tips and tricks, because they will help you to learn how to count faster. So talking about counting fast, this is a great segue to get into our second point, which is actually counting faster. So if you have a bit of difficulty finding operations like 6 times 8 is 48 in your mind, or 8 plus 6 is 14 relatively fast, that means you need to drill a little bit and practice a little bit. Now, I would highly recommend things like TT Rockstars, for example. Very quick disclaimer here, not affiliated to TT Rockstars at all or to any software whatsoever. There's no link in the description below. Just saying that this is a fun game, and some other games too, which this has helped my daughter, and some other games have been really helpful. But if you're a parent, you can allow your child to have a little bit of iPad time or a bit of phone time to try and play a game where they can learn to ping. I would say 2 seconds is really good. If your child is pinging a multiplication in 2 seconds, that's really good. If it's taking them 6 to 10 seconds to ping like 6 times 6 is 36 or 7 times 9 is 63, that's too long. Because if you think about it, when you have to do a long division, you might have 5 multiplications involved, and each one of those multiplications is going to feel like a lot. Well, it's the same thing if you have a long multiplication with 3 digits by 3 digits, you'll have 9 different products, and all those products are going to take a really long time. And so for a child, that looks like a mountain to climb. And we don't want that, because when you see a mountain to climb, you don't really want to do it, and then the homework takes a really long time. So instead of that, let's try and ping a little bit faster. Let's get the fundamentals good, and then this is really going to help when you do your mathematics. Our next tip for today is understanding packets. Yeah, so in mathematics, we use packets a lot. So what are packets? Well, there's a big misconception about what the difference between a plus a and a times a is. So simply put, a plus a is 2a. That's an apple plus an apple. You get 2 apples. And an apple times an apple is an apple times itself, which is an apple squared. So a lot of kids have trouble with this, and it's really important to make that distinction. Now, further to this, we work with packets all the time, and it's important to put things together that belong together. It's a little bit like putting things in separate baskets. So 2a squared can be added to 5a squared and is simply 7a squared. You can do that with pi as well. 2 pi's and 5 pi's, well, that's 7 pi's. You can do that with cosine x. 2 cosine x and 5 cosine x is 7 cosine x. So the essential operation here is 2 plus 5 is 7. So none of this is very complicated, but understanding that you're not going to mix the pi's with the cosine x's, you're not going to mix the a squares with the pi's, everything stays separate. So you're not mixing your apples and your bananas, everything stays in its own compartment, and that's fine. And so as long as you understand packaging or packeting, then I guess you're doing a good job, and that's going to help you a lot with your mathematics. Our fourth tip for today is going to be to get your algebra down. Now, algebra is super important. It's an essential skill, and it's very important. It's like your technique, right? If you play a sport, you need, like if you play tennis, you need a forehand and a backhand. If you play football, you need to know how to shoot the ball and pass. It's the same thing. If you play mathematics, or if you're doing mathematics, you need to know how to move stuff around, how to expand stuff and factorize stuff. So what do we mean by algebra? Things like expansions. Expansions are essential skills. That's why we drilled them so much at school. When you have a bracket and it's like 3a multiplied by 4a minus 2, remembering that 3 times 4 is 12, and then a times a is a number times itself, so it's a squared, not 2a, right? So a number times itself is squared. And then when you do 3a times negative 2, a positive times a negative is a negative, and then 3 times 2 is 6, and then there's an a hanging out. So all these things are super important. This is part of expansion, and you need to become fluent with this. And factorization is pretty much the reverse process of that. So if you look at 4a minus 2b in this example, we realize that 4 is a common factor to nothing, but 2 is a common factor to both of these numbers. There's a 2 inside of 4 and there's a 2 inside of 2b. And then you also have a b that's common to the first term and the second term. So what you're allowed to do is to just take the 2b and put it out in front of a bracket. That's called factorizing. And then you're left with 2a, because if you do 2b times 2a, then you get the 4ab. And you're left with negative 1, because 2b times negative 1 is the negative 2b that we had at the beginning. Again, go and find videos, practice worksheets on expansions and factorization so that you're comfortable doing it, expanding and factorizing, and that you have no trouble when you come to a moment in a question that has to do with that.
As you will find in multivariable calculus, there is often a number of solutions for any given problem.
Another part to this is how we solve equations. So if you see something like 4x plus 7 equals 15, it's super important that you know how to move stuff from side to side and isolate x. So that the end of the question is x equal, right? So you need to get to x equal. How do you do that? You move the 7 to the other side, following the rules of algebra. Plus becomes minus. So 4x equals 15 minus 7. And then we'll have to follow another rule, which is times becomes divide. So 4 times x, we want to move the 4 to the other side. Times becomes divide. It'll be 15 minus 7 is 8, and then we're going to divide that by 4. So it'll be 8 divided by 4, which is 2. If you need to solve equations, again, go watch some videos, go do some work on how you move quantities from side to side in mathematics. The equal sign is like the middle of the pitch, where you're allowed to move things from side to side as long as you follow the rules. So things can move around. Plus becomes minus, minus becomes plus, times becomes divide, and divide becomes times. It's the reverse operation each time. So very, very important that you would know your algebra and you know how to solve equations. Our fifth tip of the day is knowing how to simplify fractions or deal with fractions and deal with decimals. It's very important that when you come to the end of a question like 2x plus 3 over 5 equals 7, you don't get stuck and simply go like, instead, it's super important to know how to add a whole number to a fraction, subtract a whole number from a fraction, multiply two fractions, divide a fraction by a fraction. You simply have 4 operations with fractions that you need to know. So make sure you're comfortable with that, or adding a whole number to a fraction. Again, this is not something that I can cover right here in 2 seconds, but go ahead, make sure that you know how to deal with fractions. And the second point in this tip is how we multiply decimals. Everybody knows that 2 times 8 is 16, but what is 0.02 times 0.8? Well, there's 2 decimal points in the first one and 1 decimal point in the second one, so the answer should have 3 decimal points. Again, practice multiplying decimals. There are some videos on our channel to help you with all of this. Highly recommend you go and watch them to make sure that you're comfortable with all of these types of questions, and then you won't have any trouble. When you come to the end of a question, you'll know that this is 0.016 and you'll be totally fine. Crushing it. And this brings us for our final tip for today. Tip number 6, learn the variations. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you have an expansion like 5 times 3a minus 1 and you're feeling pretty comfortable with it, you're like 5 times 3a, that's 15a, 5 times -1 is -5. Okay, super awesome. Well, what happens if? I really like to ask myself that question. What happens if? What happens if instead of 5, it's -5? Oh, well, okay, so -5 times 3a, a negative times a positive is a negative, so that changes a little bit. And then a -5 times a -1, a negative times a negative is a positive, so that becomes +5. So you need to be very comfortable with all the different variations of a problem, and you will see that a lot. So whenever you're doing math problems, typically speaking, in the review section from your book, you'll have different variations of a problem. And then when you come to the test, you'll have one of those variations presented by your teacher. If it's an early question, it'll be like an earlier variation, like an easy one. If it's like one of the latter questions, it'll be one of the hard variations of the problem. And so you should be comfortable with all of them so that whatever's being thrown at you, you're totally fine with it and you know how to deal with it. Alright, so this is how you can crush math at school. I hope this video was useful to you. Remember that as long as you know how to do all the variations, you know your fractions, you know your decimals, you know how to solve algebra, you know how to move stuff from side to side, you know how to expand, you know how to factorize, you will do really well in mathematics. And if you know how to count, that's even better, so that you can ping really fast when it comes to doing an operation. Now, with that in mind, it is time to jump into your topics. Study Pythagoras' theorem, try and understand the concept. Study quadratic equations, understand the concept. Study differentiation, integration, study whatever you need to study and make sure you understand the concepts. And if your foundations are strong, which is essentially what this video is all about, making sure that you have solid basics, then the work will be so much easier for you because you won't get troubled by doing the steps. The steps won't be the bit that are bugging you. You'll just have to deal with the concepts, right? So make sure that your foundation is solid and then you can build a really big house. All right. So hopefully this video was good and you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Mathemagic channel and we shall see you on the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.